with changes. I think, as I said, it's all up to him and his cabinet to decide what's best. And now that he is supported by the opposition in Parliament, erstwhile opposition, now as you say, MDP also probably will be considered as an opposition party, but the erstwhile opposition, the opposition that was there when President Nasheed was in government, probably would want to work with President Wahid to see which policies may be continued and which may be discontinued. As you know, the political opposition to President Nasheed has had very strong views about some of his economic policies. This would be the time they try to convince the new president that they may be discontinued. Let's see.
Vice President Dr. Wahid, when he took over as the new president, in his first nationwide address, he said that the events that unfolded on Tuesday showed the true independence or sovereignty of the Constitution. And with that, he said the independence of the police and the MDF was shown through that. And immediately after his appointment, he had solved the crisis of MNBC and Raja Radio. Do you think that this independence that has suddenly been given to the public and to the commissions and institutions, do you think that would have any, that would trigger any changes in how the public perceive what independence is and what true sovereignty is?
Definitely, I think the general public, the Maldivian public, has been more aware of Constitution now than they were about, let's say, even 2 months ago. They're more aware of the rule of law than they were aware of it maybe, let's say, 2 months ago. They're definitely more aware of certain fundamental rights than they were aware of them 2 months ago. The protests, the continued exposure of the public to constitutional provisions, the Bill of Rights, the provisions relating to access to justice, sanctity of life, right to counsel, right to habeas corpus, right to an attorney, all these are explained to the public now in very dramatic fashion that's going to stick in their minds for a long while. So it's been a very educational process also to an extent, I would say. And I think all of those factors combined made the public realize that Constitution is actually the words we have chosen to live by, how we would want to govern our state and our own rights with that of the state. Public also have rights, state with the state. It's a contract with the state where the state powers honor and respect the individual rights. So I think that realization has settled in, and all of us have renewed our allegiance to the power of the Constitution and the magic it does. I think until recently, Constitution probably was just a book in which some black ink was written and some dead provisions were there. It was only left for some lawyers or some judges to interpret and apply. But I think public has now started seeing Constitution as a living document that breathes life and has a power of its own, a magic of its own, and can be related to individual liberties, can be related to his or her role in government or state affairs. So I think that is the success or the message that we can take home from the events of last nearly 1 month.
So, to wrap up, as an onlooker, as a politician, as someone who has seen this change, what are the last words? Very briefly, what are the last words you have to share with us?
I think some of the events that had happened are not very proud moments for the Maldivian history. Some of the things we could have avoided, some of the things we would have wanted to do differently. And the past few days are not showing very proud moments for us, but they define us as a country. They tell us what we are as a country and what we are going through. And we need to learn from these events. We have lots to learn from them. And I would suggest, or probably if I could convince few others, I would want to have an exercise where some independent lawyers in partnership with the Prosecutor General or the Human Rights Commission or even an international body would want to revisit the events, look at them purely from a professional angle in the light of our constitution, human rights, democracy, and see what went wrong, what needs to be done to consolidate democracy in this country, and what the whole succession of events has actually transpired. So I think a group of professional people, credible people, need to do an independent assessment of the events that had happened in this country and see who is wrong, who is to be blamed, where the fault was, where the fault could have been rectified, and what went wrong in this country. What made President Nasheed go home? What made this country see a government gets terminated prematurely? What made a vice president rise up to be president? And why the chaos in the country? Why the division? How we could come to a compromise, talk nation rather than people, talk generations rather than elections, and see how we could build this country despite the differences we have. We have to find common ground. We have no choice but to stress on common ground. What unites us is more important than what divides us.
Thank you,
That
sir.
is my message.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. And we end this special coverage with a report that takes a look at the events that unfolded over the past few days, which led to the President Nasheed's resignation. Thank you for being with us. Have a good night. The activities led by 23rd December Alliance for 22 consecutive nights ended unexpectedly. The protests, which began at the MMA area, ended at Artificial Beach. When MMA grounds were closed, protesters moved to the fish market area and the streets of Male. Protests took a turn for the worse when the protesters started gathering at the Artificial Beach area. Since then, every night, MDP activists gathered at the area and tried to counter the peaceful protests. The protests, which were being held to oppose the unlawful arrest and detention of Criminal Court Chief Judge Abdullah Muhammad on the orders of former President Mohammad Nasheed, ended in the most unexpected manner. Like other nights, on the 6th, when 23rd December Alliance members of the public and opposition parties gathered at the Artificial Beach area to continue the protests, MDP activists were already gathered there. Before the protest could really begin, things heated up when protesters and MDP activists started exchanging verbal attacks. Before things could take a violent turn, police arrived at the scene and started to separate the crowds to stop violence from erupting. However, police were soon ordered to move from the area on the orders of their leading commander. Police moved from the area upon the arrival of the defense force. As soon as police left the area, clashes erupted between protesters and MDP activists. While they were throwing stones and other objects at each other, the defense forces stood idly by. Police who left the area suddenly arrived at the scene and started to control the violence. When police officers left the area, their discontent was clearly evident from their faces. The police force marched to the Republic Square, and the events that took place after that would not have been predicted by anyone. They started protesting the unlawful orders that were being issued to them by the government. Soon, officials of the defense force were deployed to counter the police and to try and convince them to reconsider their actions. However, the number of protesting police officers kept increasing. Then, recently resigned President Mohammad Nasheed even attended the protest and asked the police to drop their arms and to give in to the MNDF, promising them no harm if they did that. When he attended the protest, neither the police commissioner Ahmed Fasih nor Home Minister Hassan Afif had addressed the situation. Police, however, did not allow Nasheed to address them and called on the authorities to free the uniformed bodies. At around 8 o'clock in the morning, the first clashes erupted between police and the armed forces. The MNDF first used a large amount of tear gas and started filing into the Republic Square. The police who were protesting took up the challenge and confronted them. MNDF officials then fired rubber bullets against the police and other protesters. But police did not relent. With the help of shields that their allies at the police headquarters threw to them, they confronted the army, while civilian protesters threw stones and other objects at the MNDF officials. that resulted in the MNDF going back into the army headquarters. While these confrontations were going on, no one knew the exact location of Mohammad Nasheed. However, witnesses said that he was in the MNDF headquarters. Suddenly, celebratory cheers erupted in the Republic Square when some officials of the police defected to the opposition. More MNDF officials kept joining the police protesters, and MNDF and police officials from nearby islands also came to Male to join the protest. What we heard after that was that protesters from the uniformed bodies had set conditions for the government. They demanded the president to resign by 1:30 and for the police commissioner Ahmed Fasih and his 2 assistants to resign as well. They said that the conditions were not negotiable. The police commissioner Ahmed Fasih was the first to give in to the conditions set by the opposing forces when he resigned. After realizing the situation and the mindset of police and defense force, former President Mohammad Nasheed also decided to resign. He announced his decision at a press conference held at President's office at 1 o'clock.
Adi Rajya Etak Ginaguna, Jelutik Vidan Kama, Aluganda Fena Tive, Alugandu Mirajege, Raisu Jumuria Kamu, Yetu Feshti, Istifati.
Although he announced that he resigned voluntarily, less than 24 hours into his resignation, President Nasheed and his allies started claiming that he was forced to resign at gunpoint.